What if the people who tucked you in when you were sick, who called you every Sunday without fail, who drove 4 hours just to sit beside you in a waiting room, what if those same people were quietly, carefully, heartbreakingly disappearing? You, not out of cruelty, not out of hatred, but out of a love so desperate, it had nowhere left to go except a plan you'd never see coming. And what if the most devastating part wasn't what they did? It was that you kept forgetting it was happening, over and over and over again? Welcome back. Grab something warm to drink. Get comfortable, because this one is going to take something out of you before it gives something back, and it is absolutely worth it. I want you to picture the deepest sleep of your life. Not restless, not interrupted, not the kind where you're half-conscious at 2 a.m., wondering if you left the stove on. I mean the kind of sleep that holds you like still water. Absolute quiet. The kind of rest that makes you believe, even before you open your eyes, that everything is exactly right in the world. That's how I slept that third morning at a rented fishing lodge in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. And even before I opened my eyes, lying there with wood smoke still faint in the air, and morning birds just starting outside the window, I thought this is what retirement is supposed to feel like. My name is Walter Hargrove. Walt. To anyone who's known me longer than 10 minutes, I was 61 years old, just retired after 29 years as a structural engineer outside Richmond, Virginia. And my 2 kids, my daughter Laurel and my son Beckett, had surprised me with a 5-day fishing trip up in the Appalachian foothills. Just the 3 of us. No email, no obligations, no reason to be anywhere except on that dock with bad coffee and the good kind of silence. I was certain I was the luckiest man alive. I was not. When I opened my eyes, the light told me immediately something was off. Hi. Late morning, maybe pushing 10 o'clock. Laurel was never still past 6. My daughter ran her life the way I ran construction projects, on a precise schedule, with zero tolerance for drift. She once restructured my entire home office on Thanksgiving morning before the turkey was even thawed. So when I called out into the lodge and heard nothing, I mean nothing. I felt it before I understood it. That heavy, weighted silence that has texture to it. I shuffled out in my flannel and socks and stopped in the doorway of the main room. Both beds made perfectly. Laurel's overnight bag gone. Beckett's brown canvas fishing jacket that had hung on the hook by the door since we arrived gone. The kitchen counter where we'd lined up 4 days' worth of groceries cleared. The car keys that hung on the little wooden peg by the entrance gone. I stood on that cold hardwood and laughed, out loud, to no one. Because my first thought, and I want you to understand how fully I believe this, my very first thought was that these 2 were pranking me. I walked to the window, fully expecting to see Beckett crouched behind the truck, face buried in his sleeve, trying not to give it away, while Laurel stood 2 feet back, pretending she had absolutely nothing to do with it, while having everything to do with it. The driveway was empty. The truck was gone. I checked the nightstand for my phone. Gone. I checked my jacket pocket. Nothing. I went to the side table where I always set my wallet before bed. Gone. Now, I am a man who spent 3 decades designing load-bearing structures. I locate rational explanations. I stand on solid ground. So I did what I always do. I told myself they'd made a supply run, forgotten to leave a note, and they'd be back by noon with coffee and a perfectly reasonable story. And Beckett, my quiet, careful younger child who measured every word like it cost him money, would be just behind Laurel doing that thing he always did, almost smiling, stopping himself just short, because fully smiling would compromise his entire brand. Noon came, then 2, then 5. By the time the sky turned that deep bruised purple it gets over the mountains, just before full dark, I had walked the lodge perimeter 4 times, flagged down exactly 0 cars on the gravel road, and eaten the only thing left in the kitchen, half a box of saltines and a can of tomato soup I heated on the gas range, because at least they'd left the gas on. Small mercies. I sat on the porch steps and let myself feel what was actually true. My children had not gotten confused, had not forgotten me, had not had an emergency and panicked. They had left. Deliberately. Quietly. While I slept that warm, still, perfect sleep which was starting to feel, in hindsight, less like rest, and more like something arranged. And that's when the memory came. Thin, flickering, like a candle someone had lit in a room 3 doors down. A white room. Bright, clinical light. A man in a dark gray cardigan leaning toward me with a pen in his hand, and Laurel sitting right beside me, her knuckles pale from squeezing my hand so hard. The memory lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then it was gone, like trying to hold smoke. I pressed my fingers to my temples. I knew that room. I knew that feeling, that specific dread of sitting up straight while someone says something you're not ready to hear. But the edges kept dissolving. I told myself it was stress, hunger, fear. I believed that. I should not have. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair closest to the window, with all the lights on, and an unmarked orange prescription bottle on the table beside me. Found in the bathroom. No pharmacy logo, no doctor's name, no dosage information, just a plain white sticker with 3 words in plain font. Take 1 daily. That was it. And somewhere after midnight, when the headlights of a passing car swept through the window without slowing, I forced myself to do what I always did in a crisis. I made a list. What do I actually know? 1 Laurel and Beckett brought me here and left while I slept. Organized, deliberate, thorough. This was not a panic. This was a plan. 2. The prescription bottle has no markings. Someone left it intentionally, for me. 3. I had a memory I couldn't hold. White room, pale knuckles, gray cardigan. 4. I do not know why I know this lodge. Why do I know this lodge? Morning came gray and damp, mist sitting low between the pines like the mountain was thinking too hard, and in the sharper light I found 2 things I had missed. The first was behind a loose baseboard panel beneath the kitchen sink, a folded piece of notebook paper, small careful letters I would have recognized anywhere. I had seen that handwriting on birthday cards and grocery lists and sticky notes on my refrigerator for 30 years. It was Laurel's. I unfolded it the way you open something when you already suspect it's going to rearrange you. Dad, by the time you find this, you'll be scared and angry, and you'll think we abandoned you. I need you to trust that we did not. There's so much we need to tell you. And we've tried. We've tried more times than you know. The doctor said the only way forward was for you to find it yourself. Don't fight the memories when they come. Let them in. We love you more than you will ever understand. I read it 4 times, folded it back along its original creases, put it in my shirt pocket, then sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs had quietly decided they were finished standing. More times, plural. The second thing I found was behind the woodpile around the back of the lodge, a tin box, green, slightly rusted at the corners, my name written on the lid in black marker, not Dad, not Mr. Hargrove, just Walt. Like whoever left it wasn't sure which version of me would be the one to find it. Inside 3 photographs and a folded card. I looked at the photographs first. The first me, standing on this exact porch, 1 arm around Laurel, 1 arm around Beckett, smiling like a man with no concerns in the world. On the back, in Beckett's handwriting, trip 1. He made it to day 4. The second me at the dock alone staring at the water. Hair slightly longer, different flannel. On the back, trip 2, he found the sign. Didn't make it to morning. The third me, asleep in the armchair I had spent the night in. The orange prescription bottle on the table beside me. On the back, the letters slightly less steady, trip 3. He took the pill. We had to start over. I set those photographs down on top of the woodpile and stood completely still. I had been here before. Not once, 3 times. 3 fishing trips. 3 versions of this exact morning. 3 times my children had driven away from this lodge, knowing exactly what came next, and chosen to come back anyway. 3 times I had gone home to my quiet life in Richmond with absolutely no memory of any of it. No gap. No sense of missing time. Just a retired man going about his days, talking about the weather, asking Beckett if he was seeing anyone, thinking everything was perfectly fine. The card in the tin said one line. No signature this time, Walt. Don't run from what you remember. And right on cue, the door in my mind swung open. The white room came back fully. I was seated across from a man named Dr. Caldwell, the name rising like something that had always been there, just submerged. Gray cardigan. Careful voice. The way he said, "Oh and no," Walt, with that rehearsed calmness that doctors use when they've delivered the same news enough times to have smoothed every rough edge out of it. What I'm describing, Walt, is called severe episodic dissociative amnesia. Roughly every 72 hours, your brain undergoes what I can only describe as a hard reset. The previous memory cycle becomes almost entirely inaccessible. Within each window, you function completely normally. You'd have no awareness of the disruption at all. And I heard myself in that memory ask in a voice that didn't sound like the Walt Hargrove I believed I was. How long has this been happening? Dr. Caldwell looked at Laurel before he looked back at me. 2 years, Walt. I came back to the woodpile with the mist and the tin box, and 2 years of my life lived in 72-hour fragments, cut and reset, my children watching me forget and choosing every single time to try again. That was the thing that undid me. Not the diagnosis, not the lost time. What broke me open was the image of Beckett and Laurel driving away from this lodge, knowing exactly how it had ended before, and pointing the car back up the mountain road anyway. That's not abandonment. That is the bravest, most heartbreaking thing I can imagine. I went back inside, dried my face, drank water from the tap, and I turned on the small television in the corner that I hadn't once thought to touch in 3 days. The national news was on, and the face on the screen made me drop my glass. The name scrolling across the bottom: federal fugitive Glenn Hargrove, wanted for wire fraud, identity falsification, and illegal dissolution of protected medical research accounts across 4 states, last seen Northern Virginia. Glenn Hargrove, my half-brother. Same father, but different mothers, but different everything. We had grown up parallel, me in Virginia, steady and quiet, him in Nevada, which I had always privately felt explained a great deal. We'd had exactly one stretch of closeness, 4 years in our 40s, when our father got sick and forced us into the same hospitals, the same hard conversations about legacy and money and what family means when it's under real pressure. During those 4 years, I made one catastrophic mistake. I trusted him. And now, with Glenn's face on a federal news broadcast, the rest of the architecture came crashing back into place. 18 months before that first fishing trip, I'd been contacted by a privately funded medical foundation, a longitudinal study on a rare neurological condition. I remembered sitting across from Dr. Caldwell for the first time, asking who had referred me. I remembered his brief hesitation before he said, "And Mr. Glenn Hargrove. He indicated he was your brother." I remembered correcting him. Half-brother, like that one word was going to protect me from anything. What Beckett had uncovered, and Beckett, before his quiet exit from a career he'd never fully explained to me, had spent 3 years working adjacent to federal financial crimes. Was this our father's estate, held in a medical research trust worth approximately $4 million, contained a disbursement clause that Glenn's lawyers had found and Glenn's mind had weaponized. If either beneficiary was determined to be cognitively incapacitated, unable to manage their own affairs, unable to maintain coherent long-term memory, their share transferred automatically to the remaining competent beneficiary. Glenn hadn't reported symptoms to Dr. Caldwell out of concern. He had manufactured them. The unmarked prescription bottle, the one with no label, no pharmacy, no doctor, wasn't mysterious. It was the mechanism, a compound, taken consistently, that induced the exact pattern of memory disruption that Dr. Caldwell had been documenting, measuring, and officially recording for 18 months as a naturally occurring neurological condition. Glenn had been getting to me before every evaluation in my coffee, in my food, and in the daily vitamins I took every single morning without a second thought, because my doctor had recommended them, and I was the kind of man who followed doctors' recommendations. Glenn had replaced them, and I had swallowed them every day thinking I was taking care of myself while he sat across from me at Sunday dinners and asked how I was feeling, and listened to me say, "Fine, just a little foggy lately," and nodded with his hand on my shoulder, and said, "You're getting older, Walt. It happens." What Glenn had not calculated was Laurel. About 14 months ago, she had sat alone in her car outside my house and watched Glenn's vehicle pull away from my driveway at an hour he had no legitimate reason to be there. Laurel, who noticed everything, who had her father's engineering brain wrapped in her mother's instincts, Laurel had pulled the thread. She took my vitamins to a lab, found Dr. Caldwell independently, presenting as a concerned daughter, and started asking questions that made him uncomfortable enough to start asking his own. When she told Beckett, he recognized within the week exactly what Glenn had built and exactly which federal statutes it shattered. My children had not taken me to the Blue Ridge Mountains to abandon me. They had taken me there to protect me while the case was being finished. The empty lodge, the missing wallet, the isolation with no phone and no ID. It wasn't cruelty. It was a safe house strategy. Keep me off the grid, unreachable while everything collapsed around Glenn Hargrove at the federal level. The real prescription bottle, Dr. Caldwell's actual compound, the one that taken consistently would begin reversing what Glenn's version had done, was the one they'd left on the bathroom sink. They'd left me the antidote. They'd left me Laurel's note. They'd left me the tin box, so that when the memories came back and they believed they would, they trusted they would, I'd have the full picture waiting for me. My children had played this with the same precision Glenn had played his game. They had just played it with love instead of greed. I picked up the orange bottle, opened it, took one. Then I sat down in front of the television, in front of Glenn Hargrove's face on the national news, and I let myself feel something I hadn't been able to feel in a long time because I hadn't been able to hold on to feelings long enough for them to fully form. I felt clear. 3 hours later, a car came up the gravel road. This time it slowed. This time it stopped. I was off that couch and across the lodge in 4 steps. Laurel came through the door first, and I want to tell you I was composed, measured, that I handled it with the quiet dignity of a retired structural engineer who has seen a great many things. What actually happened is I held my daughter in that doorway for a long time without saying a single word. Beckett came in behind her and stood slightly to the side, hands in his jacket pockets, the way he always did. And when I finally looked at him over Laurel's shoulder, his jaw was tight in the way that meant he was holding something in. I reached out and grabbed the back of his neck and pulled him in. He made this sound, short, sharp, like a man who'd been holding his breath for 3 years and had only just now been told he was allowed to stop. The 3 of us stood in that cold, empty lodge that had held 3 versions of the same morning, and nobody said anything for a long while. Laurel pulled back first. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady because she was Laurel. "Do you remember?" "All of it," I said. And Beckett said quietly, almost to himself, "It worked." Glenn Hargrove was arrested 14 hours after his face appeared on that national broadcast. Federal agents, 4 counts of financial fraud, 2 counts of identity falsification, and 1 count, the one Beckett had spent the better part of a year helping build with his former colleagues. 1 beautiful, airtight count of deliberate pharmaceutical manipulation resulting in documented cognitive harm. They found the compound in a storage unit registered under a shell company Glenn had set up in Reno. They found 18 months of emails between him and a disgraced pharmacologist who'd lost his license in 2018. They found the falsified intake notes fed to Dr. Caldwell's study, manufactured symptom reports, fake witness statements, a whole careful architecture of fiction built to make Walt Hargrove look like a man quietly falling apart. They found all of it, because Beckett had made sure they would. The trust disbursement was reversed, every penny. The estate returned to its original split, and Glenn's legal fees, which were considerable because Glenn had always believed in spending money he hadn't quite earned yet, consumed his share down to almost nothing before the first hearing concluded. But the moment I have turned over in my mind on quiet evenings since the way you turn a smooth stone in your palm was this. Glenn's attorney requested that I provide a recorded statement confirming I had no lasting cognitive impairment, that I was, in the court's language, of sound mind and full recollection. I sat down in front of that camera, clear-eyed, sharp, every memory intact and fully accounted for, and I gave them 45 minutes of the most detailed, precise, chronologically perfect testimony that room had ever received. Dates, conversations, dosage timelines, financial maneuvers, all of it. The attorney reportedly stopped the recording twice to confer with his client. Glenn Hargrove took a plea deal within the week. The last time I saw my half-brother, and that distinction matters now more than it ever did, was across a courtroom. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished in the specific way that men who've built themselves on other people's losses tend to look when those losses are finally, irrevocably returned. He looked at me once, right before the judge spoke. I looked back. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I remembered everything, and he knew it. I still go fishing sometimes, real trips now. No strategy, no orange bottles and carefully arranged disappearances. Just me, a decent rod, bad coffee, and if I'm lucky, one of my kids on the dock beside me complaining about the early hour. Laurel still reorganizes things she has absolutely no business reorganizing. Beckett still almost smiles, then stops himself just short. And I wake up every single morning knowing exactly who I am, exactly where I've been, and exactly what it cost the people who love me to bring me back. I take my real pill every morning. I remember everything. And I am finally, fully, irreversibly awake. Because here's what Glenn Hargrove never understood about me, and what I hope you carry with you when you leave this story. You can steal a man's memory. You can take his years, his clarity, his sense of himself. You can be very precise about it, and very patient, and almost get away with it entirely. But you cannot steal what his children are made of. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do the right thing. They just chose wrong.